We are back and ready to kick off the first match of the day, and it is going to be Ryvius versus tom60229. So, Ryvius off the back of a very convincing win with this mage has to lock it in again, because when they're actually, when they actually put their decks in, submit them for the week, they're submitted for 2 opponents. So you do have to think a little bit further ahead. But let's check out what deck Tom has actually brought here, and we can see he is going to be on the rogue, as we were aware. But you want to just break this one down for us. This is the primary deck, of course.
Yep, similar to the deck we spotlighted earlier, this is our Tom's Rogue is running Zilix and Chef Dominant's main list, like you were alluding to earlier, probably to hedge against Warrior, but still be good against everything else that it wants to be good against. We also see a Bloodseal Corsair and Acidic Swamp Ooze, so definitely a nod to a lot of Rogue mirrors. Having weapon destruction can definitely help swing the game back into your favor if your opponent has an early waggle pick.
Yeah, and what do you think the problems are going to be here? Or, the positives going against Ryvius' mage? Are there any cards that actually really help? Because all this weapon hate is pretty much going to be dead to Tom here.
Well, against Mage, a 1-mana 1/2 isn't that powerful, and now there's a 2-mana 3/2. You want to be doing a bit more powerful things with the cards you have available. The 1 sap is probably going to be a little integral at least in the first match before any deck switching happens, because if a big giant comes down, you don't want to be swinging 8 damage into it, right? Like throwing out Avisses, backstabs, all that stuff. It's a lot of resources invested just to kill a 1 minion.
Yeah, I think one thing that might help out a little bit is Tom is running a Hench Clan Thug as well, which can snowball out of control if there just isn't a quick answer to it. So there is a way to push a lot of damage early, but I am very interested to see how Tom is going to pilot this rogue versus this this deck from Ryvius that I'm looking forward to seeing once again, as it is the Mana Cyclone Giant Summon Conjurer's Calling, whatever mage at this point. So let's take a look at Ryvius' mage, and we can just have a look at it right now as we go into it. And it is going to be the double Frost Nova is the big stick out point for me, and it's going to help a lot, I feel, in this matchup specifically.
Yeah, we saw yesterday using the Frost Nova after Ryvius managed to create a board, just stop his opponent from doing anything. And if you can do that 1 or 2 turns in a row, you can just shut out your opponent and do 30 damage over a couple turns. He's got a mind control tech in here as well. Might come into handy a little bit against Rogue. Depends how many miscreants come down, and if the Rogue tries to go wide, that can help as well. And along with that, the Rebel Bouncers do a similar thing. They can kind of punish the Rogue for going wide on the board by coming down a bit cheaper. Another benefit of the Rebel Bouncers that you can Conjurer's Calling it as well.
Yeah, and one of the sort of sideways interactions between Frost Nova as well is that if you Frost Nova a Rogue's board, they often can't just pass the next turn, right? So they normally do develop more minions, which means you develop more minions into, say, helping with a Sea Giant go down, helping with a Rebel Bouncer go down, the same with the Mind Control tech. So I think the Frost Novas, with the help of Ray of Frost, of course, is going to delay the board enough to then activate these minions so much easier for Ryvius. I think this is going to be a tough one for Tom to do here, but we'll see. But I'm always afraid of this Cyclone Mage from Ryvius here, because it can do absurd things. It can play early game, it can play super late game, and do all the things in the middle as well, with a few help from an extra few random spells from the Mage class, which on average I think is one of the better classes to just have random spells from.
Mage spells are pretty good. They do a variety of powerful things.
Yeah, I'm looking forward to this one. Who have you got as an advantage here, Tom versus Ryvius?
So yesterday I went with Tom, but I think that I'm going to have to go with Ryvius. I really like this Mage deck, and I think the way Ryvius built it is going to be very powerful.
Okay, well, we'll see how it goes. See the players there just getting ready. Ryvius on the right, Tom on the left, of course. Tom always looks relaxed, almost to the point of falling asleep when he plays a lot of the time, and it's definitely not a bad thing. It's not like, he does fall asleep while he's playing it and cause him some problems, but he always just looks so relaxed. I think that's a certain point of just experience at this point. I remember back in the early days, Tom competing and doing well in some of the earliest LAN tournaments in Hearthstone. So he's been playing for a very, very long time, and obviously was the previous world champion. So there is definitely no slouch. Even though the matchup might be difficult, in terms of experience, Tom is looking pretty good as we get into game number 1. Tom on the Rogue, Ryvius on the Mage. Let's go. I see a Conjurer's Calling already, so seemingly pretty good. But what do you make of it in the opening hand for this specific matchup?
So from the Mage, the Conjurer's Calling is a very powerful card. It's not necessarily what you might be looking for right off the bat, and Ryvius has to decide if he wants to keep this with anything else, or if he wants to keep... so he ended up keeping just 1. I think keeping 1 is fine. Keeping 2 is like a bit excessive. Yeah. Obviously, it's a twin spell, so you can use it multiple times. But Conjurer's Calling by itself doesn't do anything. If you end up drawing like 3 or 4 spells, the Conjurer's Calling is sitting in your hand, and you can't do a whole lot with it. From Tom's side, we actually see him pitch the sap back. Recognizes going first, he's going to have a much harder time activating Miscreant or Raiding Party. He's going to want other stuff, even though sap can be a very powerful tool against the Mage.
Yeah, a lot of the time an early sap is specifically for a Mountain Giant, and this deck has so many other things it can do that you might not end up seeing a Mountain Giant for a while anyway. So I do like the throw, and with double prep as well, it means that Tom has access to some fairly powerful turns in at least the early game. But Ryvius with a Sorcerer's Apprentice and some spells, you do always have to be aware that one Sorcerer's Apprentice even can make this deck do really nutty things.
Interestingly, I think Ryvius here is deciding whether or not he wants to play out the Sorcerer's Apprentice. Obviously, it's very easy to kill from the rogue side with a backstab, or even an Abyss if it's if it's a dire situation, you think you can get rid of it. But I think from Ryvius' perspective, if he plays a Sorcerer's Apprentice here, he has the option to go Khadgar, Coin Conch Calling on the Apprentice the turn after, which gives him an incredibly wide board. And how does Rogue deal with wide boards? It just doesn't.
It doesn't. Yeah, it needs to discover a Vanish, but Ryvius, after just deliberating for the whole extent of his turn, does just decide to hold on a little bit and ping face. And I do think actually this is one of the nuances of the deck that is very, very difficult to learn, is you don't always have to be doing things, because when you do decide to go off, you can do it so crazy that you gain such a singular powerful turn that you don't really need the build up a lot of the time. You can just decide, I'll wait, and then bam, the game's won.
Yeah, you can definitely do some explosive turns, and Ryvius did decide to hold back the Sorcerer's Apprentice in favor of hoping to get to one of those turns later. Tom using the prep to activate the Miscreant, doesn't want to shove the Eviscerate face just yet.
Yeah, I think Eviscerate is so valuable in just dealing with the pesky minions, the awkward ones, even if it's just an Apprentice. That's scary in this deck. Like, every minion is pretty scary when it's just left to sit on the board. But right now, Tom's, putting on a pretty aggressive front here. This Hench Clan I mentioned earlier is going to be a little bit of a problem. It's just going to be froze out with that first version of Ray of Frost. But Ryvius has to piece together some kind of plan, because at the moment there are two minions on board that are pretty difficult to deal with.
Yeah, Mage doesn't have a lot of single target removal per se. We have a couple of Ray of Frosts that kind of delay the game a little bit until you can get those explosive turns, and you can use Ray of Frost as removal. Obviously, the first iteration freezes a minion, but if it's already frozen, you can deal 2 damage with it. But with the one twin spell, you can't really kill off the Hench Clan Thug. So Ryvius is pinging it off, trying to see if there's some way he can deal with it later on.
It does have magic trick, so you can discover either AoE or direct removal in the form of, say, Frostbolt, or maybe a Flame Strike for later on. A small note as well: if the Hench Clan ever gets too big, with the abundance of Conjurer's Call he's got, he can just Conjurer's Call it to say, okay, you have 2 3-drops, which isn't great, but it might be better than a Hench Clan that's becoming as big as a Mountain Giant pretty soon.
It'd have to get pretty big before we see Ryvius Conch calling it, but yeah, that's definitely a factor to consider. Similarly, a big Edwin can be dealt with in the same fashion, using Conjurer's Calling to deal with a 16-16 and make it a 3-3 into 2-4.
Seems good to me. And now Ryvius might have to start making tough choices. I think he'd kill for a Frost Nova right about now, so he can actually set up some kind of board. Then Nova, especially after seeing 1 prep and an SI used, it's there's got to be limitations in how much removal from hand that Tom has left.
Ryvius opting for Ziliax this turn. There's not a whole lot he can do with the rest of his hand. There's quite a lot of, I don't want to call them combo pieces. They do, like, all these cards can be used with so many different other cards in the deck, but he doesn't quite have a perfect, like a good turn to do to kick off. So he's using the Ziliax now to kind of stall out for an extra turn.
I think as well, something to note if you're not too familiar with this deck, there are a lot of cards in hand, and they cost, collectively quite a lot of mana. They can all be played in 1 turn, more or less, at some points. So this large hand size can get, small really quickly, but for the trade-off for a very powerful turn, and with the help of that bad boy, the Mana Cyclone, then you're about to see some fun things happen as far as I'm concerned. Yeah. Every spell that Ryvius plays in this turn, he can then generate that number equal back to him with the Mana Cyclone, and I think that's what we're about to see.
Quickly picking up a nice bear off of the magic trick, recognizing that he's going to need some extra life to work with.
Oh, look at this.
So instead of going for the Mana Cyclone route, Ryvius found a way to be able to play his Mountain Giant this turn, which is huge. He knows Tom is only running 1 sap, and even with the sap, there's a lot of other stuff on board now, so freezing the Hench Clan Thug, preventing that from going face.
Yeah, and this is huge, right? This is what I was saying. Like, out of nowhere, Ryvius had nothing, and now he has a full board, one of which is a Sea Giant.
Tom knows exactly where he's going, and that's to the bottom of his deck. Edwin pickup. If he had picked up a sap here, that would have been incredible, but he can still clean up quite a bit of the board. He has a backstep now. He can deal with either Kagura or 3-2 if he chooses. He can decide how much he wants to throw face. We didn't pick up a Leroy. We did not, sorry, pick up a Leroy, so there's a bit less burst damage available to Tom. There's an Eviscerate on the far left of his hand. I'm not sure if you can see it in the corner there.
There is also Nomi with a Shadow Step as well.
Yeah.
So not that you can do it this turn, of course, but just something to consider as double Shadow Step. My only question is, do you actually assume this Cleave is going to not be dealt with? I mean, we can obviously see this double Conjurer's Call in, but with Frost Novas and stuff, do you need to go all in on Cleave? Or is there something better to do this turn that feels a little bit safer?
I think it'd be very difficult for Ryvius to ever deal with one Nomi, let alone 2 or 3. If it's being dealt with, you know, air quotes, it's going to be the Frost Nova, and that's not really dealing with it. So I think going in for Big Edwin could be a definite possibility here. He might choose to SI instead to maybe clean up a few other minions, but I think Edwin's just the best way to go. Like, even though you know your opponent has like a Conjurer's Calling, if they Conjurer's Calling your Edwin instead of their Sea Giant, you're pretty okay with that.
And also you do have the refill of the Nomi, as you said, so even if this board is wiped, you can just drop Nomi and say, well, can you do anything else? Because you need a lot of Frost Novas to make this work.
So Ryvius in a difficult spot here. He can't quite value trade off a Sea Giant into an Edwin. If it was a 9/9, you could, and then Conjurer's Calling, but there's not really any taunts at 10 mana either, so that's probably out of the question. He's likely very happy he picked up the Ice Barrier for the magic trick, because it looks like he's going to be taking a lot of damage over the next turn or two.
I wonder if in a round, like, he tries to kind of set up some kind of 2-turn, so he could trade off the Ziliax, maybe think about killing the Hench Clan, and then just Ice Barrier and let the Van Cleef attack equals the Ice Barrier, if that makes sense. And then just push damage and Conjurer's Call in the Sea Giant.
He has to think about how much damage he can play around. Leroy 6, if you look at the board, so the Ziliax is very likely going to die because you have to get through the taunt either to kill face or clear the rest of the board. He's hoping for some Mulch Munchers here, a 10 mana rush minion. That would help him a lot if he does happen to hit it. With Kagura still on the board, ooh, not quite.
Okay. I mean, it's still good going forward.
Oh yeah, definitely. So Ryvius went for this play. The Mulch Muncher high roll would have been incredible and would have let him basically clear the entire board and set up lethal, I believe. This way he's just saying, all right, I can't play around, you know, Leroy step, whatever.
And I believe this is lethal, right?
So there's the Edwin, there's an Eviscerate in hand.
And he could just play the one drop and then Shadow Step, right, to proc the extra damage anyway. So he can Shadow Step the SI and replay and still go for the Eviscerate. So Tom just put on too much a little bit too quickly. And with no Frost Nova, Ryvius just could not defend quick enough. And yeah, that game looked a little bit rough there for Ryvius. So maybe I take it all back. Maybe Ro can just get the job done here.
I mean, it's difficult to say. I mean, in that game, we saw that Ryvius got quite a few of the cards he needs to come back, but not enough to be able to piece together that explosive turn. We saw that near the end, he went in for the final sort of, all right, I need to go now, Apprentice, Magic Trick, and then he ended up going, instead of for the Mana Cycle, he went for the Sea Giant to try and make some proactive play. It didn't quite work out for him, but those are the cards he's dealt with, and that's kind of what he decided was his best chance of winning.
Yeah, and also there's a few things that, you know, say he could have drawn. For example, there were 2 mirror images available, which would have made a big difference in just reducing that damage, as well as the Frost Novas, of course. So, you know, definitely a long way to go for Ryvius here if he wants to take this series. But Tom is looking pretty good at a 1-0 league. We're going to step away for just a second while we get ready for the next game. So don't go anywhere. We'll be right back.
Welcome to Dalaran. I'm Peter Whalen, one of the designers on the Hearthstone team, and I'm excited to walk you through the most magical city in Azeroth. Dalaran is home to the mightiest mages the world has ever seen, including the very aspect of magic himself, the Dragon Kalikos. This is the perfect setting for the League of Evil to strike, a floating city filled with magical artifacts. Its streets are lined with powerful magical wares of all kinds, and even the statues and tapestries come to life. But while the League of Evil have some tricks up their sleeve, a city of mages is far from defenseless. Mages will, of course, take part in the defense of Dalaran, but they're not the only ones. Hunters, druids, and paladins have all taken up arms to defend their city from evil. Take, for example, the leader of the Dalaran City Guard, Commander Rysa. She's a 3-mana, 4/3 paladin minion, and while she's in play, your secrets trigger twice. She's laying magical wards throughout the city, and when she's around, they're twice as powerful. That means Noble Sacrifice will summon 2 2/1s, and only one of them will die. Redemption will summon 2 copies of a minion that dies, and Hidden Wisdom will let you draw 4 cards. But powerful champions aren't the only thing the Dalaran defenders have in store. They also wield a new keyword, Twin Spell. Twin Spell cards can be played twice. After the first time, a fresh copy is added to your hand that you can play anytime you want. Unlike with Echo, you won't lose a Twin Spell card at the end of your turn. This let us make a wide variety of designs. Some Twin Spell cards, like the Forest Aid, are powerful tools with built-in card advantage. Others are smaller and more versatile. Take a look at Ray of Frost. It's a 1-mana spell that freezes a minion or deals 2 damage to an already frozen minion. On its own, that's a mildly interesting card. It's somewhat similar to Iceland, but this one has Twin Spell. That means you can freeze 2 different minions, the same minion across multiple turns, deal 2 damage to a minion, or follow up a Frost Nova to snipe 2 targets. You have a lot of different choices, and figuring out the right ones is the key to being a great mage. But why Twin Spell? We knew that for the defenders of Dalaran, we wanted a spell-based mechanic. It is a magical city, after all. You'll see a lot of spell-type things on the Rise of Shadows. Minions that grow based on the spells you have, that enhance or recast your spells, and more cards that care about your spell damage. With all these spell-based mechanics, we wanted a keyword that would enable you to get more mileage out of your spells. Enter Twin Spell. This keyword lets you keep a copy of the spell in hand even after you use it, gives bonus triggers for things like Gadgetzan Auctioneer, and makes you feel like you're casting even more spells than normal. It's also just a lot of fun to play. While Rafam and his league have powerful schemes and devious lackeys, the defenders of Dalaran are far from defenseless. In fact, we've saved the best for last. Take a look at the greatest hope for Dalaran, the mighty, the incredibly powerful, Hey, guys? Hey, what happened to the lights?
Tom is currently leading the way versus Ryvius with his rogue here, and got the job done in pretty convincing fashion in game number 1. But we are moving on to game number 2 now, and we get to see if they're going to make any alterations to which deck they're going to bring. We're going to find out very shortly, but you know, what do you think you would change to if you were Ryvius or Tom here?
If you mean switching to secondary decks or tertiary decks, perhaps, I believe both of them might switch off to a different version of their deck that they have right now. So Ryvius in his secondary deck, and we can see that actually in the opening hand, he has a Vexcrow. He has 2 Vexcrows in there and 2 Acidic Swamp Oozes. And he took out a Sea Giant, 2 Astromancers, and an MC Tech, and one of the Novas. Adding some extra weapon hate, and the Vexcrow is another way to use some of the cheap spells in the deck to try and create a wide board that's difficult for the Rogue to deal with. From Tom's side, he's added in a Sap and a Walk the Plank, a Life Drinker, and an extra South Sea deckhand, and he took out the weapon hate we see in his primary list, as well as taking out the Zilex and the Chef Nomi. The saps, the extra sap and the extra Walk the Plank, actually it's just 1 copy of Walk the Plank, will help him deal with some of the big minions that he's expecting Ryvius to develop.
Right, yeah, and then, you know, we saw actually yesterday from Ryvius this Vexcrow getting some work done. I was very, very impressed with it as it came out. I think on turn 5 or 6, and then just summoned a full board, and it was just, oh, yeah, okay. We have to see if it's enough though, because as you said, Tom has now, or more than likely, teched into the anti-mage build where he can get rid of these big singular threats a little bit easier with the help of the extra sap and Walk the Plank. We'll see how it starts though. But Ryvius off to just I won't even call it a slow start, because this deck often just doesn't do much on turns, you know, 2 to 3 maybe, and then goes off a little bit more on 4. So especially versus Rogue, where there's quick answers here, but a quick coin SI. Tom is not messing around this game.
Yeah, I mean, he knows if he gives the mage time, obviously every turn you draw a card, the more cards that Ryvius gets, the more likely he'll be able to make one of those explosive turns we'll be talking about that he didn't quite manage to get last game. So Tom putting on the pressure very quickly.
And continuing to follow that up as well is the prep raiding party. Yeah, Ryvius' face, it just looks, he's like, wow, coin SI into prep raiding party SI number 2. This might already be a little bit too much damage.
Sandbinder coming down, drawing a Mana Cyclone. Could have been a Mountain Giant as well. Those are elementals.
I think most importantly, the Sandbinder to it be able to potentially at least threaten the 3-2 SI7 agent is going to be cleaned up by the weapon. And now there's a Corsair. It's going from bad to worse for Mr. Ryvius here. But he does have Vexcro into Mirror Image. And now there's Ray of Frost as well. So he can do something. It's just the idea is how long can he hold off till he makes the big play, right? Is he going to be already too close to being dead? Right now we see that weapon removal get picked up. So already these tech cards getting the job done. And even the Minor Cyclone to keep the card count high.
So Ryvius recognizing he can't really wait much longer. It's turn 5, he has 17 health, he can't really be taking that much more chip damage, so he throws down the Ooze to get rid of Tom's Waggle Pick, which bounces back with the SI7 agents. And with 2 Mana Cyclones in hand, it's very unlikely this game is going to go super long and he's going to need value off of both Cyclones. So Ryvius threw out an initial Ray of Frost and played the Mana Cyclone out just to get an extra thing on board and get 1 extra card in hand.
Yeah, and also being able to make this play last turn for Ryvius, it means that he can now Vexcro, Mirror Image, and use the second Ray of Frost to create even more minions and stall out the game even more. And I would be surprised if he does anything but that this turn.
He might have to opt for something a bit more defensive than that.
Is there anything much more defensive? I mean, there's Rabble Bouncer and then the Mirror Image, but Rabble Bouncer into what's probably going to be maybe even just the Conjurer's Calling next turn. Is that too risky? I don't know.
No, he does settle for the Vexcro. I think the Rabble Bouncer doesn't actually do enough, and he needs something big coming out of these out of this Vexcro. So.
And also now there's 3 attacks and 2 taunts, so that's normally okay, especially considering the Waggle Pick will bounce as well if he swings it without a buff this turn.
Tom finds lethal very quickly.
Ryvius just couldn't put up the defense needed, I feel. And there you go. A little bit of a bop on the head, a shake of the head, and their arms go in the air as Ryvius just admits defeat. And it was just like, yeah, there's just nothing really I could have done there. And this is the Rogue, I feel, that everyone expected to see come out this weekend, of like Rogue just doing Rogue things and just demolishing games and demolishing different matchups. And pretty impressive from Tom there. And I bet he's pretty happy at just such a quick, easy victory for him versus Ryvius.
Yeah, one of the things about Rogue, I mean, even if you tech cards into it, we see cards like Mirror Image, we see cards like Ooze being teched into Ryvius' Mage, and he had them this game, it just wasn't enough. Sometimes Rogue draws cards that just do too much.
Yeah, and it's a small note as well that very, very quickly we'll have to start keeping track of and keeping you guys up to date on, is that Ryvius won yesterday, and he could have gone 2-0 so far in League, but Tom actually beat him, so it means that, you know, he's not letting Ryvius get too far ahead with a very quick 2-0 lead in week number 1. So that was lightning fast. So again, apologies to our friends over in the Americas region who maybe have cast a little bit slower matches than that, but we're just going to step away for 1 second while we get the next match ready for you. Don't go anywhere. We'll